Today's report was a little bit more concerning. The doctors were concerned that Simcha Dov is not responding to the antibiotics, and they are planning on doing a CT scan to be able to see what else is going on that's perhaps preventing him from being able to do so. I was sharing this with one of my friends, and they asked me, how do I keep going? How do I not give up? Now, I don't really know what they were asking, as if they were asking on a physical level or they're asking on a spiritual level as far as Emunah goes. But I would like to share an answer with you that is something that does give me chizuk, and is something that I hold on to as this continued series of events and situation continues. However, before we get to the answer, I would like to share with you where we can see this in davening, and of course an amazing story that will help emphasize this concept and help you appreciate the answer. Where we see it in davening is in the Bracha of Baruch Sheamar. We say 5 things, that we're going to do 5 things. In this Bracha of Baruch Sheamar, we first start off with all of the Baruchs. And then we say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. Right? We start the second half of the Bracha, and then we say we're going to do 5 things. We say we're going to praise you Hashem with shvachos and zmiros. Now, Negadelcha 1, Neshabecha 2, Nefarecha 3, V'nazkir Shimcha 4, V'namlicha 5. Right? 5 things. Negadelcha, Neshabecha, Nefarecha, V'nazkir Shimcha, V'namlicha. But 1 second. That is if you're looking inside an Ashkenez siddur. If you look inside a Sefard siddur, it says the same thing. We get to the bracha, right? Bracha Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, and we say we're going to Na'alel Hashem Elokeinu b'shvachos u'b'zmiros. Now the 5 things: Negadelcha, Neshabecha, Nefarecha, V'namlicha. 1 second, Namlicha, and then Nazkir Shimcha. That changes the order. In this siddur again, put them one on top of the other. In this one we say Negadelcha, Neshabecha, Nefarecha, Nazkir Shimcha is 4, Namlicha is 5. Here, however, when we say the same thing, we say Negadelcha, Neshabecha, Nefarecha, then Namlicha is 4 and Nazkir Shimcha is 5. There is definitely something going on over here that needs to be explained. What is the difference between the order of here we say first Nazkir Shimcha and then Namlicha, and here we're going to say Namlicha and then Nazkir Shimcha? What's the difference? To make this question even stronger, we need to understand what are those things referring to. So really the 5 things are 5 separate things that we do every day in Pesukei Zimra. We're not going to go into all 5 of them in this particular video because that would be very long. But let's just look at the last 2. When we say Nazkir Shimcha, that is referring to Vayivarech David, because we are saying Hashem is the one who does everything. In Vayivarech David we say L'cha Hashem HaGedula, it is to you is Hashem is Gdula Gvura Tiferes Netzach and Hoid. L'cha Hashem HaMelech HaMisnaseh. L'cha, for you is the Malchus and Misnaseh. We say Ata Moshe B'Kol. You are the one who rules everything. Yodcha koyach, it's in your hand. Yodcha legadol, it's in your hand. And we keep praising. It's all Hashem. We praise you because it is up to you. Atuhu Hashem. You are the one. Levadecha by yourself. Atos. You are the one who created Shemaim. It is all placing it on Hashem. Atuhu. Therefore, we say that's Nazkir Shemech. However, Namlicha is referring to Oz Yashir, and in Oz Yashir, we conclude the climax of Oz Yashir is Hashem Yimlech Li'olam V'ed, that Hashem will be the king. And so we continue to say, Ki Hashem Hamlucha, U'Moshe B'Goyim. and we say, right, we want Hashem, therefore, when we say Namlicha, is referring to Oz Yosh. This, of course, goes great with the Nusach that says, first it's Nasku Shimcha, and then Namlicha, because that's the order of Psukei D'Zimra. And therefore we're saying those things in the order and the sequence that takes place. But if you say Namlicha first and Nasku Shimcha last, that's very confusing. That's not the order of Psukei D'Zimra, that's not what we're going to do. So why should we say that out of order? Why should we put Namlicha first and Nasku Shimcha last? To answer that question, we actually have to give you a Jewish answer, which means we have to ask a question, and again. And that is, why do we say Oz Yosher at the end of Psukei D'Zimra at all? If Psukei D'Zimra is about seeing Hashem in nature, and praising Hashem through nature, and recognizing that nature is all the Yad Hashem and all Hashem's tremendous wisdom, why say Oz Yosher? Why talk about Kriyas Yamsuf, which was the opposite? It was destroying nature, breaking nature, going against nature, making the water flow against its natural ways. If anything, Oz Yosher does not match everything else about Psukei D'Zimra, certainly not the conclusion of Psukei D'Zimra, where you see the lack of nature, or Hashem being so powerful and so miraculous that nature stops and ceases to exist. An answer that is given is that, in a certain way, Kriyas Yamsuf can help us appreciate the nature of the world, perhaps more than when you just see Hashem in nature. In other words, we can spend our days and our efforts in order to see Hashem in the world and to truly appreciate Hashem's wonderful and miraculous ways that nature works. And the more we learn about nature and the more we learn about biology, the more we realize how superhuman and beyond anything that a human could create is what nature is. But sometimes we don't appreciate that. Sometimes we get lulled into the natural state of things as it happens day in and day out. And therefore, a miracle that happens, something that breaks the nature, wakes us up and helps us appreciate that when we have nature involved, that too is miraculous. In fact, it's one of the answers to the famous question of the Beis Yosef, why Hanukkah is 8 days. If they found one vial of oil that could last for 1 day, why the miracle is only 7 days? And the Bali Musar says because we come to appreciate that the natural ways is also a miracle. So here too, having Kriyas Yamsuf helps us appreciate that really Hashem is the one in charge and making all of the natural things happen. So while it is somewhat unfitting, or doesn't fit the flow of what, or the purpose of Psukei D'Zimra is, it does complement and help us accentuate that it's Hashem who's in charge. And then when we just see the regular nature, we can appreciate that Hashem is the one who's doing it as well. Now let's go downstairs to the Cheder Yitoshishus, where we spent our first week here in the hospital, and I will tell you a story. Walking down this hallway after not being here for 2 weeks brings back many scary and negative emotions, but I would like to tell you the story and the place that it happened. Here's an amazing story that took place 2 weeks ago that really emphasizes the concept that I would like to share with you. We had been here in Israel for 2 weeks, and it was the night before Erev Yom Kippur, and Simchat Tov was struggling to breathe. And someone put on the lights for me. That's very nice. Must have been automatic. Maybe it was Hashem. So Simchat Tov was struggling to breathe, and we ended up having to bring him to the emergency room because his numbers were falling and we could not keep his oxygen levels in his blood high enough that he was safe. And it was many hours of applying a special breathing treatment to him in order to keep him safe, but it really required me to be physically holding a mask against his face, pumping in air. And we came to the emergency room, and for 5.5 hours I was required to do that. Certainly not fun for him, and a little challenging for me, until they finally took him into the emergency room and they intubated him. Now that saved the work because the air was automatically going into him, but he needed to be sedated because having a tube running through your mouth like that is not comfortable at all, and patients can't tolerate that. So for the next week, which was over Yom Kippur and through the first days of Sukkot, he was sedated. He was more or less put into a semi-coma where he was not fully aware of where his situation or his environment was. And they kept him in a room which is called the Cheder Oshashut, which I will show you now. This was the green door that led to the Cheder Oshashut. We have many hours standing in front of this door trying to see our son Simcha Dov. And there were many hours where we spent in this room, either sleeping actually right here on the couch or sitting here waiting to get in, because it was a post-operation surgical room, and they people were there for a couple hours and then they were put into a regular room. Dovi was in there for over a week, and it was very challenging. Like I said, A, he was sedated, so he was being kept in like a coma, and B, we were kept away from him because they didn't let parents or anyone be there except for 5 or 10 minutes out of any period of time, and then they try to catch them, and, to encourage them to leave. We eventually convinced them that we needed to be there because Simcha Dov with his ALS could not talk or communicate, and they eventually listened to us. But that was a very, very difficult week. That was a week where we were very frustrated. We were very scared for Simcha Dov. You can't stay intubated for longer than 10 days or 2 weeks maximum without there being negative consequences. And there was no solution. Ultimately, we came to the conclusion that we would have to get a trach put in order to get him out of that room. But it was during the Yom Tovim here, or that's called the Chagim, and everything is closed down, and everything is la'achar Chagim. So it did not look like he was going to be able to be, to get the trach until for another week or more, till everything settled down, and we were being kept away except for periods of time, and it was an extremely frustrating situation with no solution. This room just brings back all sorts of frustrations and negative feelings, just standing in this room telling you this story. But then an amazing thing happened. One day, one of the nurses, her name was Shira, decided that we have to help Simcha Dov. This was Chol HaMoed, I believe it was before Chol HaMoed, Shabbos Chol HaMoed, and she decided we have to get him, to get a trach put in and to get him out of this vicious cycle. And she told me, these are her words. She said, Hashem helped and sent the right doctor. There's a Dr. Zegelman who was then the attending doctor for that room. He normally does not come in. He rarely comes in. And he came in that morning that she decided we have to get him out. And Dr. Zegelman was the exact perfect person who would be willing to do this type of surgical operation in the room. Most doctors and the hospital policy is that you can't do that type of procedure in that room. You have to have an operating room, and all of the operating rooms were closed for Yom Tov, and it would not be likely to happen for another week or 10 days. But Dr. Zegelman, being a man of a lot of experience and a lot of Jewish chutzpah, didn't particularly feel he needed to listen to necessarily with the policies. He himself had been a director of some of the departments here, and understood the situation to be as it was, and with Shira at his side, they performed that right there at the bedside in that post-operation room, And some of the other patients who told me afterwards, like it was crazy. They were doing a surgery in a non-surgical room, but they did it within a half hour. The right doctor at the right time did the surgery and ended that vicious cycle and enabled the Dober to receive a trach and no longer need to be sedated. And we were able to get him out of there and into a regular hospital room where we could spend time with him and be with him the entire time, all on Chol Hamoed, at a time when it shouldn't have been able to happen. And as Shira said, Hashem clearly was working the situation, putting the right doctor at the right time in the right circumstances, and broke that cycle and saved us from having to keep him in that crazy situation for another week or 10 days. That story, that incident, helps me. It helps me not only at the time of that story or when we think about what happened, but it helps me know that Hashem is always there. Even when things are happening in a very normal fashion or natural fashion, if you would, I can see Hashem there also. I can feel Hashem there because it was so clear that He made that doctor show up on that day when that nurse decided we're going to make it happen. And even though it went against the rules and it went against the policies, it happened because Hashem wanted it to happen. That means everything else also happens because Hashem wants it to happen. And it's those stories, those incidences, those scenarios that take place that give me a certain amount of chizuk, a certain amount of recognition that Hashem really is there, holding our hands, orchestrating everything that happens. And therefore, it's not just the miracle or the perfect sequence of events or the breaking of the natural sequence that helps me feel that Hashem is there, but that helps me feel Hashem is there even when you don't see those things, even when it's not obvious, and even when things are going in a natural fashion, and even when things are going in a negative way, and things look like they're bad, just like Hashem was there when it was miraculous, I know that Hashem is there even when it's dark. And now we can appreciate why the Nusach is different. It will say the normal order of things of Psukei D'Zimra when we start off with Naskir Shmecha and then go to Namlicha. But there might be the message of changing that order is to tell us that the point of Psukei D'Zimra is really Naskir Shmecha. It's to be able to see that Hashem is the one who's in charge. Ato Hashem, you're the one. L'cha Hashem Hagdula V'Gvura, you're the one who makes the world run. B'yodcha, it's in your hand to do all of those things. You're the one who's Boyer Shemayim V'Oretz. But sometimes when we see Hashem's Namlichum, when we see Hashem's Malchus, Hashem breaks the nature of the world, that helps us appreciate it more. But it's only to appreciate more that you're the one in charge, and Naskir Shmecha. So we conclude Baruch Sheamar, the order, the sequence according to that Nusach, because that's the purpose of Psukei D'Zimra is Naskir Shmecha. We do it through Namlicha, we do it through Az Yashir, but it's really to help us recognize and Naskir Shmecha even when things are natural, as what the purpose of Psukei D'Zimra is. As we go to sleep tonight, and we know tomorrow morning there is a CAT scan, and we are unsure about what it will show and what it will reveal, we can take strength that just like Hashem has been with us this whole time, and Hashem was with us when we needed the doctor to help us with the trach, and everything worked out in a way that got us into a safer place. We can go into tomorrow and be confident that Hashem is with us there as well, and whether the results are things that we want to hear or don't want to hear, we know that Hashem is the one who is running the world, controlling the situation, and doing it exactly as the way it's supposed to be. We use the Namlicha to help us appreciate the Naskir Shmecha and see Hashem in the natural way of the world as well.